Hello and welcome to First Bank's Center for Family-Owned Businesses webinar series. I'm Mike Vandervelde and I'll be your facilitator. Today's session is all about conflict resolution. We first introduced this topic in a webinar back on December 8th. If you didn't get a chance to see it, check out the recording on the First.Bank website or our YouTube channel. Just a quick reminder, the lines are muted, but at any time, please send us your questions through the webinar tool. And keep your mouse handy. We'll be conducting a couple of polling questions along the way. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to the host of our program, Mr. Joe Ambrose.
Thanks, Mike. Good day to everyone and welcome. I'm Joe Ambrose, Executive Director of the First Bank Center for Family-Owned Businesses. Through the center, First Bank takes a holistic view of family-owned enterprises and delivers services to them beyond traditional bank products. These services are centered on insight and advice that address the family component of family-owned businesses. Today, we welcome back Kaitlyn Erb of CMA Global. CMA's team of consulting psychologists help organizations with the people side of business. Kaitlyn was co-presented with Michael Bierberg in December discussing ways to prevent family conflicts in business. So what happens if the conflict is long-standing and or unavoidable? Kaitlyn will offer her insights into resolving these conflicts that can be detrimental to both the family and the business. And now, without further ado, Kaitlyn Erb.
Thanks, Joe. I'm really happy to be here today and excited to be back with the First Bank crew talking about conflict again. So folks, thanks for tuning in today. Just to reiterate what Joe said, my name is Kaitlyn Erb. I'm a consulting psychologist with CMA. Been there about 5 years. We get to help businesses with things like coaching and leadership development. I particularly love to work with family-owned businesses because I come from one, so it's personal for me. I'm a fourth-generation owner in my family's business. It's called Erb Equipment Company. So just so you all know, that's the lens I'm coming from today. So, you know, when I'm talking about family business conflict, I do have some understanding of just how personal and high stakes it can feel. You know, it's not just the business that's on the line, so to speak, but also family relationships that we care deeply about. And lots of factors at play, lots of things to consider, especially when things get hairy or it starts to hit the fan, or however you want to talk about conflict. I'm eager to dive into it with you all today. And Mike, if you'll pop us to the next slide, we can do just that. So just to recap, managing conflict kind of is a two-sided coin, right? We look at the best way to manage conflict as preventing it from happening in the first place. And if you missed our first session, I know Joe alluded to it, but we talked quite a bit about how to prevent conflict by recognizing your own patterns, your own ways of thinking about it, and then ways to focus on some healthy communication for yourselves and for your family. So we think about prevention as either preventing damaging conflict or preventing small conflicts from unnecessarily becoming bigger. Today, to Joe's point, we're going to talk about the other side, what to do when it happens, how do we resolve it. We can have all of the best proactive, transparent communication and the best intentions, and we're still going to run into conflict because we're humans. It happens, it's natural, and some level of that is helpful to grow our businesses, to have us, help our families out. So my goal today is to talk about how to have that conversation in productive ways. There are many ways to go about handling both prevention and resolution. Families usually find what works well for them, and then sometimes it doesn't. So my hope is to add a tool to your toolbox, a way to think about resolving conflict without getting stuck in an unproductive place. So my next slide looks at what do we call it when we do get stuck. We call it conflict entrenchment. And again, it's normal, it happens, especially when we're in conflict with people that we've known for years. It's just part of life. But you'll see why it can be so sticky, why it can be so easy for us to get stuck. Here in a minute, we've got some fun plans. Before that, I'm going to talk you through just a basic model of what it kind of looks like when we do get stuck. So for most of my slides today, we're going to start at the bottom and work our way to the top, just because I like to keep things interesting. We'll all start with our own data. We assume, that we've gathered all of the facts about a situation, that we've done a great job at gathering those facts, that we have a holistic idea of what those facts are, and that our facts are right. So even though, me and someone else might have different views of a subject, we're both going to assume that we understand what's going on. We'll also jump to different conclusions, right? We may think different things about those facts. We may interpret them in different ways, and that will lead us to different solutions. So we move into this kind of right and wrong thinking when we get stuck, when we are siloed in our approaches. So instinct then tells us, hey, let me yell to you even louder why I'm right. But really all I'm doing is yelling inside my light blue or dark blue silo and not really going across to communicate effectively. So this is what happens when we're feeling stuck, we're feeling like we can't gain traction. Then folks fall into some of those patterns that we talked about last time, scorekeeping, enforcing, just feeling like we're fighting and no good's going to come out. So this is kind of how we get stuck and how there's little overlap in our viewpoints. There are gaps, missed opportunities. So I alluded to it earlier, but we're going to give you an example today. We're going to have some fun and illustrate two different approaches to conflict using some dramatic acting from our friends at First Bank. So I'm excited about this. But I'll set the stage for you, and then Mike Vanderveld will roll the video for us. So I'll give you some background. This is a case study of a family. You can see our little family tree up there. The family owns a chain of retail stores called Parts Galore Auto Store. They sell automotive parts and accessories. This dramatization involves a conversation with three family members. Carl, who is a member of G2, and his daughter, Laura, and son, Dennis. The conversation centers around whether Parts Galore should expand into Washington State through an acquisition. The company already has about 60 stores up and down the state of California. Carl took over the business when his father passed away, and he's nearing retirement and coming into the office less and less frequently. His daughter, Laura, leads the Northern California stores, and his son, Dennis, leads the Southern California stores. Okay, I'm going to turn my camera off while Mike shows us this video, and we'll be back to debrief together.
Laura, Dennis, when I'm in the office, all I hear is you two arguing. You know it's not good for the company to have the family going at each other all the time. Remember that it was conflict that almost brought down the family's business before. My dad and his brothers couldn't agree on most things, and they almost destroyed the business in the process. Thankfully, I was able to rebuild Parts Galore into the success it is now, with stores throughout the state of California. I don't want to see the business brought to its knees again because of more conflict.
But Dad, we have a huge decision to make. We have a great opportunity to expand our chain into Washington State. The owner of the 20 auto stores in Washington State is interested in selling, and I think those stores would be a great fit for us. Wouldn't you like to see us grow even more?
Maybe. I haven't spent much time diving into the numbers, but I don't really want to take a lot of time thinking about it if both of you aren't on the same page, and it's just going to mean more conflict.
Dad, this is a bad idea. We already have plenty of debt and shouldn't be taking on additional risk now. Plus, we've always grown organically and have never done an acquisition. How are we going to make sure that the new stores fit into our way of doing things? And how are we going to handle all of that debt?
I've studied the numbers very carefully, and I talked to the current owner of the Washington stores several times. They're a great fit for us, and it would be a big boost to our income.
Give me a break. I know why you really want to do it.
What is that supposed to mean?
Never mind. I don't want to get into it. The bottom line is that this is not the time to be taking on so much risk by adding all of those stores in Washington.
But what about all the opportunity in Washington? There's nobody in Washington who does auto parts as well as we do, and it's a huge chance to expand.
We don't need the extra risk.
Hey, enough. If you can't agree, then why keep up the back and forth? I want to retire soon, and I don't want to worry about you two going at each other's throats. Enough already. If you can't agree, then let's not bother talking about it anymore.
Fine.
Fine.
Okay. Some great acting. I am eager to kind of dive in and debrief with all of you. Before we do, we have a poll set up that I think Mike will run us through.
Very good. So go ahead and grab your mouse, and I'm going to launch this poll. You're seeing the question on the screen now, but I'm going to go ahead and launch it. And it says, with which character do you most identify? Is it Carl, the Generation 2, Laura, the Gen 3, or Dennis, the G3? And again, just grab your mouse and click on the answer that best correlates to what you most identify with. I'm going to give you another 15 or so seconds to think about it. Again, in that wonderful dramatization we just saw, which of the characters do you most identify with? The votes are rolling in, so I'm going to go ahead and give another 10 seconds or so. Alrighty, and we are going to do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so I'm going to close the poll, and the results are as follows. We have 24% identifying with Carl, 71% identifying with Laura, and there's just 6% of Dennis's out there.
All right. Well, hey, it's natural to kind of pick one. We all have our own preferences and ways of handling things, our own biases and assumptions, if you will. So I appreciate you all kind of jumping in and telling me where you're identifying right now. It sounds like a lot of you can see yourselves in Laura. Even if you don't have a strong preference, just kind of keep one of them and their mindset in the back of your head as we walk through this resolution model. I think it's helpful to have something tangible in mind as you move forward. Okay, let's talk about it then. So looking at entrenchment, I've added a third level to my model here because we've got 3 people. So we could see this entrenchment happening in the video, right? We could see Carl, starting at the bottom, right? Carl's data said his kids were arguing each time he saw them. His conclusion, being that they can't get along, and that he wants to prevent the negative kind of conflict that hurt his dad. And so his solution being remove the stimulus, kind of that peacemaker enforcer mindset. You all can't get along, I'm taking it away. Laura's data was, saying there's someone selling stores that are a good fit for us. The conclusion being this is a great opportunity, and the solution being let's do it. And then, Dennis thinking, hey, we've already got enough debt. We probably shouldn't be taking on additional risk. And that solution being let's pass. So he also maybe alluded to some unspecified conclusions he hasn't shared yet with that kind of loaded, I know why you really want to do it comment. But we'll be interested to dig into that a little bit later. So we can see each of them are pushing from very different things. And we can also recognize it's because they're coming from different places. They're starting with different data. So we'll talk it through together what they might do. And we'll use this conflict resolution model to do that. So it's just one model of how people might go about resolving a conflict. And Mike, if you'll pop us forward a slide. Actually, I'll have you pop me forward 2 slides. So we remember this is what it looks like when we're entrenched. We're operating in our own silos, our own mindset. The goal of the model is to merge those into one. I'll have you click and show me the resolution model. So this is designed to help us get to a mutually agreeable place. We want harmony. We want increased commitment to the relationship, to whatever our shared solution is going to be. And following our model can help us find a higher likelihood of executing on that. So what I'm going to walk you through in just a minute is a systematic way of sharing facts, your assumptions about those facts, your feelings and the impact, and what you need in a solution. So we've covered what it is. Let's talk about how it works. On the next slide, you'll see this kind of conflict resolution pyramid. Again, we start at the bottom, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have to lay the groundwork before we can reach the next level and get to the higher, get to the top. So this model helps people, again, like I mentioned, separate data from opinions, explicitly address their emotions or the impacts that they're perceiving that the situation's having, explicitly outline their needs, and help develop higher quality solutions. So let's walk through it together. Step one is to see and hear the data. This is then the facts point. This is all about being in observation mode, noticing patterns, not making any judgments. We're defining what we see and what we see in the other person. So here you'll basically talk about things you can point to. I noticed you saying X, pointing out behavior, pointing out your own observations. Both people in this step should have an opportunity to describe their data, describe the conflict as they understand it. So it's very important to be practicing active listening, even if you don't agree with what they're saying. So this is where we kind of lay out the facts on the table. If active listening is a new idea for you, I'd recommend Google searching that. There's a lot of great tools freely available about how to practice active listening, but it's the idea of listening to understand, not to reply. That part comes later. And just a reminder, this is hard. As humans, we're not good at separating out our facts from our emotions unless we're intentional. So try it right now, either with yourself in a personal situation or the actor you picked a few minutes ago, and think about how to separate out what we've seen from what people might be feeling. So Carl's statement might be something like, I've noticed a pattern while I'm around you, Laura and Dennis. You seem to argue quite a bit about this Washington opportunity. Once we've had a chance to share our facts, we'll go to step two. And this is about ensuring understanding of the others. It's why active listening is so important, because this piece looks at interpretations of the data. What is my explanation? What is your explanation? This is the piece where we verbally summarize each other's viewpoint to ensure we have mutual understanding. And it can be really hard with families because we know each other well, so it feels sort of safe to make those kinds of assumptions about what people are thinking. It's tempting to jump in. But I think, this might be the part where that old saying about what assuming does to people, it's easy to jump and it's easy to get ahead of ourselves, but we've got to lay that foundation with what the facts are, making sure we all agree on them here. So once we agree on the facts, then we can agree about other people's assumptions. Saying, hey, I see this a bit differently. Can I explain? I wonder if you're seeing it this way. What seems to be happening here is. So I've got sample language for you on each of these slides to help get started when you're having a conflict, help you walk through these steps. Step three is where you get to talk about feelings and other impacts. So a lot of times, when we're in conflict, we go straight to our emotional brains. That's just human nature. And so this is something that's hard to suspend until step three. But we can be intentional. We can use the pyramid to map out what we're thinking as far as facts, assumptions, and then emotions. So talking about those first two gives us then the space to say, hey, you keep talking about this and I'm feeling frustrated or scared or angry. We don't know what Dennis is feeling in a situation, but we know he's feeling something. This is kind of that second half of the when you, I feel statement. Thinking too about financial costs and impact can be helpful at this stage. Stage 4 is talking about needs. So we're shifting into kind of that desired future state, expressing what needs to be different from my perspective in order for us to resolve this conflict. So understanding, we are in a business setting, so both parties should be agreeing on a goal of doing what's best for the company. So this might look like saying, hey, I want to discuss a solution that works for both of us, and I need you to recognize why I'm not excited about what you've proposed. Or I want to, resolve this issue, and however we do it, I need it to keep the Southern California stores running as is. So this is kind of that ground rule for what is this final solution going to look like. It's important to be clear, reasonable, and open at this point. And finally, we hope we make it all the way to the top of the pyramid, picking a solution, staying open, being collaborative, and then making a plan of action to implement what we've agreed on. It's helpful at this level to brainstorm, kind of throw lots of things onto the table, and then pro and con list it out, or start to make an action plan for a couple of solutions. How might this look? Bottom line is you want to be specific about what each of you are going to do. So we'll see how our family handles this in just a minute. I've got a reminder of the full model on the next slide. And the pyramid is really kind of what I want you to have stick in your mind. What's the focus or the discussion point of each step? And what can we point at to enrich our discussion? So remember, in the first step, that's just data. The boxes are what is the outcome or the goal of each step? What do we want to achieve at each step? So before we dive in, I'm going to have you take another quick poll and think about which step of this model seems most difficult to accomplish right now.
All right, very good. So once again, grab your mouse, and that poll should be popping up on your screen now. And we'll give you about 30 seconds or so to make your selection. Option 1, hearing each other's data. Option 2, understanding assumptions. Option 3, recognizing impact. Option 4, focus on needs. Or option 5, solution planning. So again, which of these steps seems to be the most difficult to accomplish? The votes are starting to roll in now. We're going to give you another 15 seconds or so. All right, they're slowing down a bit. Let me give you another 5 seconds or so to make your selection. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this poll, and let's take a look at the results. 22% say hearing each other's data, 33% understanding assumptions. So that's the top vote getter. 22% recognizing impact, just 6% focus on needs, and then 17% solution planning.
Good deal. Hey, and we've got a pretty perceptive group with us today. The data and the assumptions pieces, it can be tempting to think it's easy to go through those, but you all are keying in, I think, on the piece that a lot of times you have to go slow and be really intentional for those to go well, and then they'll set the stage for the higher levels. Higher levels are not easier, but they certainly do require additional vulnerability on top of the good groundwork that you've already laid. So not uncommon to see those kinds of poll results, and thanks for sharing where you all are at. Let's watch and see how our actors handled this.
Dennis, can we talk about the acquisition opportunity in Washington again?
Sure.
I don't think we handled that conversation well. Dad said he doesn't want us to argue, but if we can't make difficult decisions and have an open discussion about ideas, we're not going to succeed as a business.
You're right, Laura. Did you watch the webinar from First Bank and Kaitlyn Erb about the conflict resolution model?
I did. I thought it was really helpful. First Bank provides some great ideas and speakers through its Center for Family-Owned Businesses. Why don't we try out that approach?
Okay, I'll start. I don't think we should do the acquisition because of the extra debt we would need to take on and because we've never done an acquisition. And it's not the time to do something like this.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that we take on too much risk in doing the acquisition.
Exactly.
Is that all? Anything else? It seems like there might be something else bothering you.
Well, I don't know. I think you have other reasons for wanting to do the acquisition.
What do you mean? Like what?
Well, you think because you run the Northern California stores that you'd also run the Washington stores. You want to be the next CEO, and you think that by expanding your territory, you'll increase your chances.
Wow. So it sounds like you've been worried all along that I want to do this acquisition so I can expand my role in the company. Is that right?
In a word, yes.
And I bet, because of that assumption, you're skeptical of some of the projections I've shown.
Right. Your desire to succeed, Dad, makes me think that you're willing to overlook the risks in the acquisition because it will help you get ahead personally.
Now I think I understand. Well, first, Dennis, let me say that if we do the Washington acquisition, I should not be the one to run that region. The current owner of the stores has promised to stay on for a couple of years to continue to run those stores. And that is important to getting the acquisition done.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, that actually makes me feel better about it.
I will admit, I wouldn't mind being CEO someday, but that has nothing to do with this acquisition.
Okay. We need to be able to work things out between us, including letting each other know when something is bothering one of us.
I completely agree. How about this for next steps? First, I'll prepare more information to address your concerns about the financial risk. Then, you and I can talk about the plan for how we will handle the acquisition if we go forward with it. Then we can take it back to Dad. How does that sound?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, let's debrief together. Also, a round of applause. I know he can't hear it, and neither can the actors, but round of applause for the actors there. They did a great job. Okay, so debriefing their approach to conflict resolution. Some things that I noticed that I liked in this case study was how they would borrow sample language from the model to move themselves along, right? Right from the slides, we could hear some things, around I've noticed that you, and really using those step-by-step pieces to walk themselves through the model. I also liked that Laura tried digging deeper respectfully with her language around, is there anything else going on here? And then Dennis was willing to jump in. He stayed open, not defensive, and was willing to engage in answering that question. Also, checking for understanding and clarifying at each step will be important, right? Any conflict is not a one-person dance. So one person can lead it, as we maybe saw here, but both have to be really willing to engage. So we need to take steps on both sides be willing to hear and share. If it's one-sided, one person will walk away feeling great, feeling really heard, and the other will say, what just happened? I put a lot of work in and I didn't get to share at all. So, you might gain a lot of understanding that way, but it's hard to progress if these things feel one-sided. So appreciated the way that our characters did that. Also of note, that they made some action plans and were able to move forward. That is a key piece, because if we don't be intentional about it, we might not make the progress we hope to. Also of note, these conversations take time. It went very smoothly in this sample. It's lucky that it worked out for us that way. But it's likely you'll need to spend more time back and forth in each stage than you saw in the video. Obviously, we wanted to shorten it for today, but really giving everybody a turn to state their facts, state their understanding, confirm, yes, you heard me correctly. Yes, you summarized my points in a way that I felt represented me. So that is a very key piece to remember from our debrief. I also, on the next slide, just want to point out a few things on the other side of the conflict coin. And we started off talking about prevention. So some things that could help this family or, anyone in particular is recognizing your typical approach, knowing all of the things we talked about in the last session about yourself will help you prepare well and go into these conversations feeling ready to engage, which is step 2. You have to participate, right? We can't just sit back and hope that it'll fix itself. And we can't fly off the handle and make unilateral decisions for everyone. At least not if you want to stay a family business and not just become a sole proprietorship or something like that. And we need to define and respect boundaries. So that can look like role boundaries within the organization. This is my job description, this is yours. It can look like respecting the boundaries between being a family member, working in the business, and being an owner. And it can be personal boundaries, right? We all set those day-to-day in and outside of family businesses. So being mindful of those things. Another thing I'll add is to think about getting out in front of conflicts that you might know are coming down the road. So, for example, in this situation, we saw Carl is probably going to need some help in 5 years when it is time to name one of his kids as successor or name someone else as a successor. It looks like, we can anticipate that might be coming, and that's an okay place to ask for help or just be really intentional in your approach. So this is a situation CMA sees frequently in our work. So, if I were wearing my consulting hat right now, I'd tell Carl to start thinking about it and framing that conversation so that it's productive when it's time to have it. Okay, and translating to action is going to be my last slide for you all, thinking about how you might take action. So I would recommend considering what are your family's hotspots or conflict topics. Think about it, write it down, and if there's one that you do want to tackle, I would recommend first taking my pyramid model and writing out your inputs at each stage. What are my facts? What are my assumptions? What are my impacts? Really thinking about what you are feeling, thinking, and proposing, and then going into it by either role-playing with a neutral party or letting someone else know, hey, I'd like to try this. Make sure you're approaching the conversation in an optimal state. Got a couple things listed there. Make sure everybody's in the right frame of mind and in the right place to discuss. And then again, your partner probably won't have this model in mind, so you can be intentional about, hey, this is what I want to try, or just be transparent about your goals for the conversation. And my last tip is go out and try it. Your skills will only get better if you practice them. It's just like a golf swing or any other skill, piano practice. You might feel a little clunky at first, but if you get out there and do it, you're going to feel better. Probably don't pick your biggest, hairiest conflict, but start with something smaller and use the model to help you build that ability. All right. Well, that's what I had for us today. folks. I really appreciate the time and willingness to engage here with me. If anybody has questions, feel free to pop those into the box. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kaitlyn. And again, for those questions, just open up that webinar section that says question and type one in there, and we'll get it and read it aloud. We do have a question here. It says, can you give some more tips for how to engage in conflict resolution with someone who hasn't seen this webinar?
Yes, right. Because it would be easy then, or easier to just say, hey, let's walk through the steps in the model. Our case study was lucky to be able to do that. I would say, first of all, name it, right? Hey, I'd like to talk about this. When is a good time for you? And ask permission to maybe try something new. Kind of outline your intent for the conversation. You know, hey, I'd like to make sure we're on the same page here. And you can verbally walk them through the model or even hand them a picture of it. You know, hey, this might feel a little funny at first, but I'd like to give it a shot with you because this is an important conversation for us. Can you be curious about this for a minute and try something new with me? Also important to know your audience. So, you know, it may be someone you have to kind of lead from behind, or, you know, I know there are many folks that won't respond productively to a model being placed in front of them. So it may be something that, you know, you have to work at a bit, but even if you have this in mind, it can help you shape the conversation. It can help you recognize what stage are we at here and what should my very next goal be, right? So if we're just trying to get the facts out, my next goal should be articulating this person's ideas and their facts so that they will say, yes, you understand me. That would be where I'd recommend to start, and also recognize when you need to call a timeout.
All right, very good. Thank you so much for that. Next question says, what do you do when you're already entrenched?
Don't get discouraged. It happens to all of us, and it takes time. You know, particularly in family businesses, this is somewhere where things can kind of get pushed to the wayside for months or years, and it's stuck, and that lives in that box over there, and we don't touch it. But don't get discouraged. You can resolve these conflicts. It just takes time. So especially those first two steps, you know, our group here, our audience here recognize that those two can be tough, and they require intentional, repeated modeling. So especially if someone's not willing to walk through the steps of the model specifically, you're not going to make a lot of progress. So those first two steps of stating your facts and listening to the other person's facts with the intent to just say, I understand where you're coming from. Demonstrating that behavior repeatedly can be helpful, and being that model of what active listening looks like. You know, we're all complex people with complex viewpoints, and so sometimes just that simple act of saying, I hear you, I recognize where you're coming from, and would you be willing to hear my side of this situation, can make some progress. Rome wasn't built in a day, so you probably won't make it all the way up the pyramid in one conversation if you're already feeling entrenched, but it's worth a shot because it's an important conversation if you're noodling on how to solve it. Also, if it gets really big or has implications, large implications for the family or the business, I would also say consider outside help. You know, if it's really in the family side, family therapy is a good option, and it's a good thing to ask for help there. There's a lot of people impacted. Also on the business side, you know, CMA is always happy to help you all get to the root or the source of that conflict and map out a good approach for how to move forward together.
All right, very good. Thanks so much for that. It does look like that is the last. Actually, no, another one just came in. What if the other party immediately defers to his or her attorney before responding to anything? Does it become a lawyer's world when one side is not willing to listen or respond on their own?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. right? And you're almost past entrenchment at that point. To the two of you aren't even having a conversation anymore. If I'm understanding the question, correctly, that can be really, really tough. And that does sound like a spot where some outside help can be helpful. I think, again, thinking about what each party wants out of it is going to be fruitful for you to have a good understanding of what are your goals and what are you likely to get out of the conversation. So a lot of times when we're at the stage where lawyers are involved, we're no longer really thinking about what's the best way to preserve this relationship or thinking about it holistically. A lot of times it gets very transactional. And so if you're at that point, it's going to require a lot more intentionality, probably some more help to navigate, get your hands around that whole situation and really focus on preserving the relationship. So happy to talk more about that offline, and I'm sending you, some good thoughts there because it's a tough spot.
Very good. Thanks so much for that question and that answer. So let me just do a last call here for questions. I don't see any others at this time. So we are going to be mindful of your time. And at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Joe Ambrose to wrap us up.
Thanks, Kaitlyn, for a terrific presentation. Open and honest communication is the first step in resolving family conflict. And thanks to everyone for joining us. If you have other questions for Kaitlyn, please feel free to email her at kerb@cmaconsult.com. Please mark your calendars for Tuesday, April 13th at 11 a.m. Central Time. John Hull of the Fortune Group, along with our own Tim Fogarty, will offer their thoughts on acquisitions by family-owned businesses. Until then, stay healthy.